Peace is the one thing money cannot buy, Adrian Blackwell once told a room full of millionaires, and I stopped believing I deserved it years ago. At 2:13 in the morning, the most powerful man in the room was standing barefoot beside a shattered glass, staring through the floor-to-ceiling windows of his Chicago mansion as if the entire city had somehow failed him. At 43, Adrian had everything most men spent their entire lives chasing. A private estate behind iron gates. A black luxury sedan waiting outside. Bank accounts large enough to make numbers feel meaningless. Men who answered his calls before the second ring. Yet none of it could quiet the one thing he could not command, his own mind. The mansion was nearly silent, except for the soft hum of the heating system and the distant ticking of an antique clock. Adrian loosened the top button of his black shirt and ran a hand through his dark brown hair, swept neatly backward, the natural silver threaded through it catching the warm light. His expression remained calm, controlled, almost unreadable. Anyone looking at him would have seen confidence. Power. A man who had never been defeated by anything that could be negotiated, purchased, or controlled. They would not have seen the exhaustion behind his brown eyes. They would not have known that he had not slept properly in weeks. Downstairs, Amara Johnson was finishing the night shift. At 30, the Black Maid had learned how to move quietly through a house built for people who never noticed the workers maintaining it. She polished the marble counters, folded the last linen towels, and checked the kitchen before heading toward the staff quarters. Then she heard the faint sound of glass breaking upstairs. Amara stopped. She knew the house rules. She knew Adrian valued privacy more than conversation. She also knew that something about that sound had not been ordinary. She climbed the stairs slowly and found him standing alone in the hallway, staring at the floor. His black tailored vest and open black shirt revealed a narrow section of the black and gray tattoo work covering his upper chest and neck. His hands rested loosely at his sides, the same. Intricate ink extending across both hands and fingers. He looked composed, but Amara noticed what others missed. His breathing was uneven. "Mr. Blackwell," she said softly. Adrian turned. His gaze settled on her with the quiet intensity that made most people lower their eyes. Amara did not. She simply looked at the broken glass, then back at him. "Are you hurt?" No, his voice was low and steady. "Then I'll clean it up." She walked past him without asking another question. A minute later, she returned with a small tray. A cup of warm tea. Nothing expensive. Nothing elaborate. She placed it on the console table beside him. Adrian looked at it, then at her. "What is that?" "Tea. I can see that." For the first time that night, something almost resembling amusement touched his face. Amara adjusted the cup carefully. "You don't have to drink it." She paused. "Just let it stay warm." Adrian stared at the steam rising from the cup. Nobody had offered him something without wanting something in return for a very long time. Amara turned to leave. "Amara." She stopped. "Yes, sir." Adrian looked at the tea again. "Why did you bring this?" Her answer was quiet. "Because you looked tired." Then she walked away, leaving the most feared man in the house standing alone with a cup of tea, a silent hallway, and the strange feeling that, for the first time in years, someone had noticed the person beneath the power. By the following evening, Adrian had almost forgotten about the tea. Almost. The cup had been empty by morning, and the kitchen staff had cleared it away before sunrise. Yet the small gesture remained in a corner of his mind that he usually kept locked. He returned to his usual routine as if nothing had happened. Meetings began at 7. Phone calls followed. Advisors brought him reports, schedules, and problems that needed decisions. Adrian answered every question with the same calm precision. His dark brown hair swept neatly backward, natural silver visible beneath the warm office lights. His black suit fit cleanly across his broad shoulders, while the open collar of his black shirt revealed a glimpse of the black and gray tattoo work across his upper chest and neck. His expression never betrayed fatigue. But when evening came, he found himself looking toward the hallway more than once. Amara noticed. She noticed everything, but she had learned that noticing did not mean interfering. She continued her work quietly, moving through the mansion with the same steady rhythm. At around 8 in the evening, Adrian entered the dining room and found the table prepared for one. Crystal glasses caught the chandelier light. A silver serving tray reflected the warm glow. An expensive dinner waited beneath polished covers. He sat down, took a few bites, and stopped. The room was beautiful, but it felt empty. 10 minutes later, Amara entered to collect the dishes. She paused when she saw the nearly untouched plate. Was something wrong with the food? Adrian asked. She looked at him. No, sir. Then why are you staring at it? I am not staring. A faint silence settled between them. Adrian leaned back. You are. Amara carefully lifted the plate. You just look tired again. His eyes narrowed slightly, not with anger, but curiosity. Do you always tell people what you think? Only when they ask. I did not ask. Then I suppose you can ignore me. For a moment, Adrian simply watched her. Most people measured every word around him. They softened their voices, chose careful phrases, and avoided anything that might sound personal. Amara did none of that. She was respectful, but she was not frightened into silence. She carried the plate toward the kitchen. Then she stopped. You ate better last night. Adrian looked up. The tea was last night. I know. And you think tea made me eat better? No, she glanced back at him. I think you were less alone. The words landed quietly. Adrian said nothing. Amara left with the plate, and the dining room returned to silence. Later that night, Adrian stood in his study beside the tall windows. The city lights stretched across Chicago like scattered stars. His phone kept vibrating on the desk, but he did not reach for it. Instead, he thought about one sentence. Less alone. He had spent years building a life where nobody could get close enough to disappoint him. He had mistaken control for peace, distance for safety, and silence for strength. Yet a woman who had never asked him for anything had somehow noticed what everyone else ignored. The next morning, Adrian entered the kitchen earlier than usual. Amara was arranging fresh coffee cups. She looked surprised to see him there. Good morning, Mr. Blackwell. Adrian glanced at the coffee, then at her. Do you make tea every morning? For anyone who wants it. He considered that answer. And if nobody asks? Amara smiled gently. Sometimes people do not know what they need until someone leaves it within reach. Adrian stood there for a moment, unusually still. Then he picked up the cup she had prepared for him. He did not say thank you. He did not need to. For the first time, he simply stayed. By the end of that week, something had changed inside the Blackwell mansion, though nobody could quite explain what it was. Adrian still held his meetings behind closed doors. He still spoke with the same measured confidence, still made decisions without hesitation, and still carried himself with the quiet authority that made an entire room fall silent when he entered. But there was one new habit. Every evening, shortly after 8, he stopped by the kitchen. Sometimes he asked for tea. Sometimes he asked for coffee. Once, he simply stood near the doorway while Amara folded clean towels. He never explained why. Amara never asked. Their strange routine continued until Friday night, when Adrian hosted an elegant dinner for several business associates. The dining room glowed beneath crystal chandeliers. Polished silver reflected the warm light, and the long table was arranged with the kind of precision that made every detail appear effortless. Adrian sat at the head, wearing his tailored black suit and open black shirt. A glimpse of the black and gray tattoos across his upper chest showed beneath the collar. His dark brown hair was swept backward, with natural silver woven through the strands, and his calm brown eyes moved from one conversation to another without revealing much. Around him, people laughed, discussed investments, and praised the evening. Adrian listened. He answered when necessary. He even smiled once. But Amara, standing quietly near the sideboard, noticed that he never touched his dinner. The guests eventually left. The cars disappeared through the gates. The house became quiet again. Adrian remained seated at the table, one hand resting beside an untouched glass of water. Amara entered carrying a tray. You can leave that, he said. She stopped. I was going to clear the table. Tomorrow. She looked at him for a moment. You have not eaten. Adrian glanced at the untouched plate. I was busy. You were surrounded by people for 3 hours. He looked up. That is not the same thing. Amara lowered the tray. The honesty of his answer surprised even him. She did not smile. She simply pulled out a chair several feet away and sat down. Adrian studied her. What are you doing? Waiting. For what? For you to stop pretending you are not tired. The room went completely still. Outside, a light rain tapped softly against the windows. Adrian looked toward the dark glass, then back at her. You seem very comfortable telling me what I do not want to hear. Maybe because everyone else tells you what they think you want to hear. That answer stayed between them. Adrian finally picked up his fork and took a small bite. Amara said nothing. She did not praise him. She did not make the moment bigger than it was. She simply remained there. After a few minutes, Adrian began eating slowly. It was the first full meal he had finished in days. When he placed the fork down, he looked at her with an expression she had never seen before. Not authority, not suspicion, something quieter. "Why do you do that?" he asked. "Do what?" "Stay." Amara folded her hands in her lap. "Because sometimes leaving is easier than caring." Adrian looked away. Her words reminded him of something he had spent years refusing to remember. His younger brother, Michael, had once told him almost the same thing after a difficult year in their family. Adrian could not remember the exact conversation anymore. Only the feeling of being understood by someone who had known him before the money, before the mansion, before the responsibilities became heavier than his own name. "You knew someone. Who believed that?" Amara asked softly. Adrian looked back at her. He had not realized he had spoken aloud. "My brother." Amara nodded. She did not ask what happened to him. She did not press for details. Instead, she stood and gathered the plates. Adrian watched her disappear toward the kitchen, and for the first time in years, a memory did not feel like a weight. It felt like a door that had been left closed for too long. 3 nights after the dinner, Adrian found himself standing outside the kitchen again, though this time he had no reason to be there. The mansion was quiet, the clocks had passed 10, and every member of the household had settled into their usual routines. Amara was sorting folded linens at the long wooden table when she noticed him in the doorway. She looked up, calm as always. "Could not sleep?" she asked. Adrian almost smiled. "Apparently, you are becoming predictable. Or you are." He stepped inside. The warm kitchen light softened the sharp lines of his face, catching the natural silver threaded through his dark brown hair and the subtle texture of his olive skin. His black shirt was open at the collar, revealing part of the fixed black and gray tattoo work across his upper chest and neck. The tattoos continued over his hands and fingers, unchanged as always. He leaned against the counter. "You said everyone needs something within reach before they know they need it." Amara nodded. "Sometimes. What if they do not know what they need?" She folded another towel. "Then they usually need someone patient enough to wait." Adrian was silent. He had spent most of his life doing the opposite. When a problem appeared, he solved it. When uncertainty appeared, he eliminated it. When someone disappointed him, he removed them from his world. Waiting had never been his strength. Neither had asking for help. His gaze moved toward the small kitchen window. Beyond it, the garden lights glowed softly over the wet stone paths. "Do you ever get tired of taking care of everyone?" he asked. Amara paused. "Sometimes." "Then why keep doing it?" She placed the towel down. "Because I know what it feels like when nobody does." Adrian looked at her. There was no performance in her voice. No attempt to make herself sound noble. Just a simple truth. He remembered the way she had described his brother earlier in the week without even knowing how deeply that name affected him. Michael. The name had followed him into the quietest corners of the house. The next morning, Adrian asked his longtime house manager whether Amara had been doing anything unusual around the mansion. The answer surprised him. She had been leaving small meals in the staff refrigerator for employees who worked late. She had quietly replaced a worn pair of work shoes for one of the older groundskeepers. She had spent her own money on a birthday card and cake for a kitchen assistant whose family lived several states away. None of it appeared on a report. None of it had been requested. None of it benefited her position. Adrian asked why nobody had mentioned these things before. The house manager gave him a puzzled look. "Because she does not make a show of it." That sentence stayed with him. That afternoon, Adrian saw Amara outside near the garden entrance. She was carrying a small paper bag toward one of the security staff members waiting near the gate. She handed it over and said something that made the man laugh. Then she walked away before he could thank her. Adrian watched from the window. For the first time, he understood that Amara did not give kindness because she expected recognition. She gave it because she had decided that what little warmth she could offer should not be kept only for herself. Later that evening, Adrian found her in the library. "Why?" he asked. Amara looked up from arranging a stack of books. "Why what? Why do you keep giving things away when you have so little?" Her expression softened. "Because having little taught me something." Adrian waited. "What?" She closed the book in her hands. "You can lose almost everything and still choose what kind of person you will be afterward." Adrian did not answer. The room seemed suddenly smaller around him. He had spent years believing that losing someone meant becoming harder. Amara had somehow learned the opposite. And for the first time, Adrian began to wonder whether the peace he had been searching for was not waiting somewhere outside his life, but buried beneath everything he had built to protect himself from it. The question stayed with Adrian long after Amara had left the library. You can lose almost everything and still choose what kind of person you will be afterward. He had heard thousands of words in boardrooms, private meetings, and quiet conversations over the years, but those were the words that followed him into the night. At 1:47 in the morning, Adrian sat alone in his study with the city glowing beyond the windows. A single lamp illuminated the dark wood of his desk. His phone rested beside a stack of reports, untouched. For once, there was nothing demanding his attention. No decision needed to be made. No problem needed to be solved. Yet his mind refused to become quiet. He opened an old drawer he had not touched in years. Inside was a photograph of two brothers standing beside a lake on a summer afternoon. Adrian was younger then, still carrying the easy confidence of a man who believed the future would always give him another chance. Beside him stood Michael, smiling at the camera with the kind of expression Adrian barely remembered how to make. Adrian held the photograph between his fingers and stared at it for a long time. He had avoided this drawer for years, not because the memories were painful, but because they were peaceful, and somehow that had become harder to face. The next morning, Amara noticed something different when Adrian entered the kitchen. He looked tired, but not restless. He stood near the counter while she prepared coffee. "You were awake late," she said. Adrian looked at her. "How do you know?" "The library light was still on when I finished." He nodded. "I found an old photograph." Amara waited. "My brother." She did not ask what happened. Instead, she placed a cup of coffee in front of him. Was he happy? Adrian looked down. The question surprised him. "Sometimes." "Then remember those times." Adrian lifted his eyes. "It is not that simple." "It does not have to be simple." She returned to arranging the breakfast dishes. "It just has to be true." Adrian carried those words with him throughout the day. That afternoon, he walked through the garden for the first time in months. The ground stretched across several acres behind the mansion, with trimmed hedges, old trees, and a stone path leading toward a quiet bench overlooking the lake. He found Amara there, sitting alone with a small book. She immediately stood. "I can leave." "No," Adrian said. "Stay." She sat again. Adrian lowered himself onto the opposite end of the bench. For several minutes, neither spoke. The silence felt different now. It was not empty. It was shared. "Michael used to come here," Adrian said eventually. Amara looked toward the lake. "Did he like it?" "He loved it." Adrian smiled faintly. He said the water made everything seem farther away. Amara closed her book. Maybe he was right. Adrian looked at the horizon. "I spent years trying to make everything farther away." His voice was quieter than usual. "People. Memories. Anything that could make me feel something I did not want to feel." Amara did not interrupt. "I thought that was strength." She looked at him. Maybe it was survival. Adrian turned toward her. "What is the difference?" "Survival keeps you standing," she said. "Peace lets you finally sit down." Adrian looked at the bench beneath him. A small breath escaped him, almost a laugh, almost disbelief. He had built an empire around never needing to sit down. Yet there he was, beside a woman who had entered his life with nothing more than a tray of tea and a refusal to treat him like someone who needed to be feared. That evening, Adrian returned to his study and opened the old drawer again. This time, he did not close it immediately. He placed the photograph on his desk where he could see it. Then he picked up his phone and made a call to someone he had not spoken to in years. When the call ended, he remained still for several seconds. Something inside him had shifted. He did not feel healed. He did not feel finished with the past. But for the first time, he no longer felt the need to run from it. And somewhere in the quiet mansion, Amara was folding towels, unaware that one simple truth had begun changing the man who had once believed peace was something meant for other people. The morning after Adrian made that phone call, the mansion felt strangely different. Nothing had changed on the surface. The same polished marble reflected the morning light. The same staff moved quietly through the halls. The same black sedan waited beyond the front entrance. Yet Adrian carried himself with a weight that was somehow lighter than before. He had spoken to an old family friend the previous evening, someone who had known Michael well. For nearly an hour, Adrian had listened to stories he had not heard in years. Michael had laughed too loudly. Michael had given away more money than he should have. Michael had believed that people were worth helping even when nobody noticed. And most of all, Michael had believed Adrian was capable of becoming more than the man he had built himself into. Adrian had expected the memories to hurt. Instead, they had made him breathe more easily. When he entered the kitchen that morning, Amara was standing beside the counter, preparing breakfast for the household staff. She looked over her shoulder. "You seem different." Adrian stopped. "Different how?" "Quieter." He considered that. "I thought you liked quiet." "I do." She smiled. "But this is a different kind." Adrian poured himself coffee. "I spoke to someone about Michael." Amara nodded slowly. "Was it difficult?" "Yes." He looked down at the cup. "But it was good." Amara did not ask for details. That was becoming one of the things Adrian appreciated most about her. She never tried to force open doors he had not chosen to unlock. Instead, she gave him room to open them himself. Later that afternoon, Adrian found her in the library again. She was dusting the shelves near the tall windows when he entered. "I have a question," he said. "That sounds serious." "It is." She turned toward him. "What happens when someone has spent so long protecting themselves that they forget how to live?" Amara placed the cloth on the table. "They start small." "How small?" "They eat dinner at the table instead of at their desk." Adrian gave a faint smile. "I already do that." "Then they sleep." "I am working on that." "Then they call someone they miss." Adrian looked at her. "I did that too." Amara nodded. "Then maybe you are already learning." He looked around the library, at the shelves filled with books he rarely opened, and the expensive furniture that had once seemed like proof of success. "I thought peace meant having no problems." "Most people think that." "What does it mean to you?" Amara took a breath. "Peace means you can have a problem and still feel like yourself." Adrian stood silently. That answer reached deeper than he expected. His entire life had been built around solving problems before they became threats to his control. But perhaps peace was not the absence of difficulty. Perhaps it was the ability to remain human while difficulty existed. That evening, Adrian did something no one in the household expected. He asked the staff to join him for dinner. Not in separate shifts. Not in the staff dining room. Together, at the long table in the main dining room. There was hesitation at first. The employees exchanged uncertain looks. Adrian simply took his seat and told them they were welcome to sit. Amara sat several places away. Conversation began slowly, then grew warmer. Someone told a funny story about a delivery driver getting lost. Another person mentioned a family birthday coming up. Adrian listened more than he spoke. At one point, he laughed. It was quiet, genuine, and unfamiliar enough that several people looked at him in surprise. Amara noticed, but she did not comment. When dinner ended, Adrian remained at the table while everyone else slowly left. He looked around the room. For years, this dining room had been a symbol of everything he had accumulated. Tonight, it felt like something else. A place where people had actually shared a meal. A place that sounded less empty. Amara paused at the doorway. "Good night, Mr. Blackwell." Adrian looked at her. "Good night, Amara." She left. Adrian remained seated for another minute. Then he realized something that unsettled him in the best possible way. He had not thought about the past for most of the evening. He had simply been present. And for a man who had spent years trying to escape his own memories, being present felt almost like freedom. For the first time in years, Adrian slept until morning. There was no restless pacing through the halls, no untouched cup of coffee beside his desk, no quiet hours spent staring through the windows at a city that seemed impossibly far away. When he woke, pale sunlight was spreading across the bedroom, and for several seconds he simply lay there, listening to the ordinary sounds of the mansion beginning its day. He almost did not recognize the feeling. It was not excitement. It was not happiness exactly. It was calm. Downstairs, Amara was already working. When Adrian entered the kitchen, she looked up and immediately noticed the difference. "You slept," she said. Adrian paused. "How do you know?" "You look rested." He poured coffee and glanced toward the window. "I forgot what that felt like." Amara smiled softly. "Then maybe you should remember it." Adrian took a sip. "I intend to." Over the next 2 weeks, small changes continued. He began leaving his study before midnight. He started eating breakfast instead of skipping it. He walked through the garden most mornings, sometimes alone and sometimes with a book in his hand. The mansion remained enormous, but Adrian no longer seemed determined to fill every room with his presence. He had learned that silence could be peaceful when it was chosen. One afternoon, he found Amara sitting near the staff lounge, helping an older employee organize a stack of medical appointment papers. She noticed him and stood. "Everything all right, sir?" "Yes." Adrian looked at the papers. "Do you help everyone with everything?" Amara gave a small smile. "Not everything. It seems like everything. People helped me when I needed it." Adrian nodded. Then his expression became thoughtful. "What if helping someone means giving them something you cannot easily replace?" Amara studied him. "Then you decide whether giving it matters more than keeping it." Adrian said nothing. The question stayed with him that evening. He had always believed that protecting what belonged to him was the same as protecting the people around him. But Amara had shown him another possibility. Sometimes love, loyalty, and respect were not about possession. They were about giving someone room to remain themselves. That night, Adrian received an unexpected piece of news. A close family advisor told him that several long-standing business responsibilities could be transferred to trusted partners. Adrian had enough resources to step away from some of the constant pressure without risking the stability of everything he had built. Years ago, he would have dismissed the idea immediately. Now he considered it. For the first time, he asked himself a question that had nothing to do with money. What kind of life did he actually want? The answer did not come quickly, but when he walked through the kitchen later that night, he saw Amara preparing tea for the night's staff, and something became clear. He wanted a life where people did not have to earn the right to be treated gently. He wanted a home that felt like a home. He wanted to remember Michael without feeling that memory was a punishment. And he wanted to stop measuring his worth by how much he could control. The next morning, Adrian announced that the mansion would begin supporting a local community program in Michael's memory. The staff listened quietly as he explained that the program would provide meals, school supplies, and assistance for families facing difficult seasons. Amara stood near the back of the room. Their eyes met. Adrian gave her the smallest nod. She returned it. No grand speech was necessary. He knew where the idea had begun. That evening, Adrian walked outside and sat on the old bench overlooking the lake. The air was cool, the water calm beneath the fading sunlight. Amara eventually joined him, carrying 2 cups of tea. She handed him one and sat beside him. "You are getting used to this," she said. Adrian looked at the cup. "To tea. To staying." He looked across the water and smiled. "Maybe." For a while, neither spoke. The silence no longer felt like something Adrian had to escape. It felt like something he had finally learned to share. Then his phone rang from inside the house. Adrian glanced toward the sound, but he did not immediately stand. For once, the world could wait a few minutes. And that simple choice was proof that the man who once measured every second by responsibility was finally learning how to live inside the moments that belonged only to him. The phone call Adrian had ignored that evening became impossible to ignore the next morning. By 9 o'clock, 3 messages were waiting on his desk, each connected to the same concern. Several people within his organization had noticed that he was stepping away from responsibilities he once handled personally. Some saw it as weakness. Others saw an opportunity. Adrian read every message without changing his expression. His dark brown hair was swept neatly backward, natural silver visible through the strands, and his calm brown eyes remained steady as he reviewed the information. The black and gray tattoos across his neck, upper chest, hands, and fingers remained a familiar contrast against his black shirt and tailored vest. He had spent most of his life believing that control was the only reliable form of protection. Now he was learning that control could become another kind of prison. When Amara entered the study with fresh coffee, she immediately noticed the papers spread across the desk. "Bad morning?" she asked. Adrian looked up. "Complicated." She placed the cup beside him. "That is different from bad." He gave her a quiet smile. "You always find a way to make things sound simple. Maybe they are simple sometimes." Adrian leaned back. "People are questioning my decisions. Are you questioning them?" The question stopped him. He looked toward the window. "Some of them." Amara nodded. "Then maybe that is not a bad thing." Adrian studied her. "You are not worried about what happens if I step away. Should I be? You work here." "I do." She smiled gently. "But your peace is not my responsibility." Adrian was silent. The words were not cold. They were honest. And somehow, they were exactly what he needed to hear. He had begun to understand that caring for someone did not mean carrying every part of their life for them. That afternoon, Adrian made several decisions he had postponed for years. He delegated responsibilities to people he trusted. He stopped answering every message immediately. He allowed a meeting to continue without him. None of these things weakened the foundation he had built. Instead, they created space around it. By sunset, Adrian walked through the garden and found Amara near the lake. She was collecting a few fallen branches from the stone path. He approached slowly. "You were right," he said. She looked over. "About what?" "I cannot protect everyone by controlling everything." Amara set the branches aside. "That sounds like something you had to discover yourself." Adrian nodded. "I did." He looked across the water. "But there is something else." "What?" "I am afraid that if I stop controlling everything, I might lose people." Amara's expression softened. "People who stay because you control them were never really staying." Adrian lowered his eyes. The truth was uncomfortable because it was clean. He had spent years building walls and calling them security. He had surrounded himself with loyalty, but rarely allowed anyone the freedom to disagree with him. Amara had never demanded access to his life. She had simply remained honest within it. That evening, Adrian returned to the mansion and found a small envelope on his desk. Inside was an old photograph of Michael and him beside the lake. He turned it over and found a handwritten note from Michael that he had forgotten about. The message was simple. "Do not spend your whole life trying to keep everything from changing." Adrian read it twice. Then a third time. He sat back and closed his eyes. For years, he had believed that protecting Michael's memory meant remaining exactly the man he had become after losing him. Now he understood the opposite. Maybe honoring his brother meant becoming the man Michael had always believed he could be. When Adrian opened his eyes, the room looked different. The same desk, the same windows, the same city beyond the glass. But something inside him had finally loosened. He placed the photograph beside the lamp instead of returning it to the drawer. Then he walked downstairs. Amara was in the kitchen, preparing tea for the evening staff. Adrian stopped in the doorway. "Amara." She looked up. "Yes." He held the photograph in his hand. "Thank you." She understood without asking for an explanation. "You are welcome." Adrian smiled. It was not the guarded smile people knew from business meetings. It was quieter, real, and for the first time, he did not feel ashamed of it. By the following spring, the Blackwell mansion no longer felt like a place built to impress strangers. It still had marble floors, tall windows, polished wood, and quiet rooms large enough to echo, but something warmer had settled into the house. Adrian had changed without becoming someone unrecognizable. He was still composed, still confident, still carrying the quiet authority that had defined him for decades. His dark brown hair remained swept backward, natural silver threaded through it, and his short, neatly shaped beard carried the same subtle silver. His black and gray tattoos remained fixed across his neck, upper chest, both hands, and fingers, visible beneath the open collar of his black shirt and tailored black vest. But now, when morning light entered the house, Adrian actually noticed it. He noticed the sound of coffee being poured. He noticed laughter from the kitchen. He noticed when someone needed help without waiting for them to ask. Most importantly, he noticed himself. On a quiet Saturday morning, Adrian walked toward the garden carrying 2 cups of tea. Amara was sitting on the familiar bench beside the lake, looking across the water. She turned when she heard his footsteps. "You are early," she said. Adrian handed her one of the cups. "I remembered something." "What?" "You told me peace lets you sit down." Amara smiled. "I remember." Adrian sat beside her. The lake was almost perfectly still, reflecting the pale blue sky. For a few minutes, neither of them spoke. The silence that once would have made Adrian uncomfortable now felt natural. He looked at the water and thought about the man he had been when this journey began. A man who could buy almost anything, yet could not purchase one quiet night. A man surrounded by people, yet unable to let anyone close enough to see that he was tired. A man who believed that being strong meant carrying everything alone. Amara had never lectured him. She had never demanded that he change. She had simply shown him another way to live, one small act at a time. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you had not noticed me?" Amara asked. Adrian considered the question. "I probably would have kept going. And would that have been so bad?" He looked at her. "I would have survived." She waited. Adrian smiled faintly. "But I do not think I would have lived very much." Amara looked toward the lake again. "That is a big difference." "It is." Adrian reached into his jacket and pulled out the old photograph of Michael. He placed it carefully on the bench between them. "I used to keep this hidden." Amara looked at the photograph. "Not anymore?" No. He looked at his brother's younger face and felt something he had not expected. Gratitude. Not because the loss had become easy, but because the memory no longer demanded that he remain trapped inside it. I finally understand what Michael was trying to tell me, Adrian said. What did he tell you? Adrian looked across the water. That a life built only around protection is not really a life. Amara nodded slowly. The morning breeze moved gently through the trees. Somewhere behind them, the mansion doors opened, and the ordinary sounds of the household began. Adrian stood, then offered his hand to Amara. She accepted it, and together they walked back toward the house. There was no grand transformation waiting inside. No perfect ending. Adrian still had responsibilities. He still had difficult days. He still carried memories that would never disappear completely. But he no longer feared those things. He had learned that peace was not a mansion without problems, a bank account without limits, or a life where nothing ever changed. Peace was waking up and choosing not to run from yourself. It was sharing a quiet morning with someone who had reminded you that kindness could survive hardship. It was allowing a memory to become gratitude instead of regret. As Adrian reached the doors, he glanced back at the lake one last time. Then he smiled. The man who once owned everything except peace had finally stopped searching for something to possess. He had learned something far more valuable. Peace was not another thing to own. It was something to practice, something to protect, and sometimes something another person quietly teaches you how to find.